Hello everyone, this is Sebastian. I'm your host for today on our station TTIGA, which means Thinking Through Issues in Ghana and Africa. I have Charles Prempeh with me. He's a PhD student at the University of Cambridge, reading divinity. Hopefully he becomes one of our great researchers in the field. And Prempeh, you're welcome for today.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
It's great to have me. Yes.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you, and I believe that our audience will also enjoy listening to you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I think we have a lot to share with our audience.
Awesome.
And obviously, we'll be happy to invite their opinions as they listen to us.
Perfect. And what I would like to do is that I will welcome comments from them in the future, so you can respond to it as appropriate.
I think that would be great. I mean, it's important we have intersection of ideas, especially as they relate to pertinent issues, as you did mention, occurring in Ghana, Africa, and probably the rest of the world.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. I'll be more than happy to host you once again.
Right.
In the future, and anytime you want to come on the station to discuss issues that are very important.
And I'm always happy to be part of the program.
Great.
So count on me all the time.
Great. So like I said, we have a very short discussion to do right now. It's about polygyny.
Right.
Today is about polygyny.
Right.
So first of all, what is your take on polygyny in Ghana?
Yeah, I think polygyny, okay, before I talk about my take, we need to define what polygyny is. Now, quite often people talk about polygamy, but throughout history, we've never recorded instances where Africa had polygamy. What we had in Africa was rather polygyny, and I'll explain. So, polygamy is a practice where both men and women have the opportunity of living with more than a spouse. So, a woman can have more than a spouse, and a man can also have more than a spouse. Now, when a woman has more than a spouse, it is called polyandry. And if a man has more than a spouse, it's called polygyny. Now, historically, the only time where some form of polyandry obtained in Africa was among the Lele of Congo. So there was an anthropologist, Mary Douglas, who wrote about the Lele of Congo, where there was a village wife who belonged to an eight-sect society, and all men who constituted the eighth sect had access to her, so she provided sexual service to all men, but no one person monopolized her, and if you did not belong to the eighth sect, you could not have access to her. And when she had children, the children belonged to the village, and she was such an important figure in the political activities of the society. But it wasn't widespread in Africa. So basically what we had in Africa was polygyny. Now having explained that, I would say that polygyny has become very topical, especially in Ghana. It isn't a new topic, but it has received a lot of attention, probably because of the involvement of some so-called Christian pastors. So during the colonial period, when the missionaries engaged Africans, one of the issues they had to deal with was polygyny. And it was such a big issue because do you allow a man with more than a wife, to participate in the Eucharist, in other words, the Holy Communion? If you allowed that to happen, what kind of impression was the church creating, in the minds of others? And if the church disallowed men with more than a spouse to participate in the communion, was that not also a kind of judgmental posture, against persons who had accepted Christ? So it was a dilemma. It was like a dilemma tale, as we say, to most of the missionaries. Now, when someone became a Christian and the person had more than a wife, should a person discard all his wife except one in order to be Christian, or the person should be Christian alongside the person's wives or numerous wives? Now, if the missionaries were to say, look, you can't come with your numerous wives, you have to divorce all your wives except one, were they not promoting divorce? And of course, we know that the Bible is categorically against divorce, except on condition of adultery. So it was a bigger challenge.
And even with that, you have to, if you can live with your wife or your husband, you can go ahead.
Exactly. So I think the Bible is very clear when it comes to polygyny, because when it comes to divorce, because it's a difficult issue. When you get divorced, it affects you yourself psychologically, it affects, if there are children, it affects the children, it affects society. So the Bible is very hard on divorce. Yeah, so having said that, the question I've been thinking about is polygyny actually a big thing? How should we see it? Should we see it as a mortal sin, or we should see it as a social issue that has wide spectrum ramification?
But is there anywhere in the Bible that states clearly that polygyny or polygamy in general is unacceptable?
Well, it is not explicitly stated that we cannot have multiple wives, but the Bible is also clear, especially when Jesus was asked about a man who had a wife, and then the man died. So serial kind of polygyny, existed. But the Bible is very clear when Jesus told the disciples that, in the beginning, it was one man, one wife. But because of your disobedience, that's why Moses allowed it. Because the people were appealing to the Mosaic law to rationalize why they should be allowed to have more than a spouse. So the Bible is very clear that a man should have a wife, not wives. Right? Now, in instances where we recorded polygyny in the Bible, in the case of Abraham, in the case of Solomon, in the case of David, and others, you notice that they were not necessarily for the sake of satisfying their erotic feelings, right? So Abraham was monogamous, or was monogamist, until Sarah died. Okay, so we know Hagar was brought in as a surrogate, but Hagar wasn't married legally by Abraham.
Right.
And so it was after Sarah had died that Abraham married Keturah. In the same way, David was involved with multiple women, right? But in most cases, it was out of disobedience.
Okay, so let's make it briefly here.
Right.
So what do you think? So what is your take? Like
my take is that we should be careful how we go about the debate. I think we should not easily promote it because it has a lot of challenges and difficulties for society. Okay. And more to the point that when you have more than a wife, what's the rationale behind it? Why should a man have more than a wife? Right? Is it for the sake of children? Is it to satisfy sexual urges and appetite? Is it for political status that you want to gain in society? Why should a man have more than a wife?
So you think if someone has a very good reason to back it, do you think it's okay?
No, I mean that's why I'm asking. What reason is a man able to give for?
So that's why I'm also saying that. So
yes.
You think that if someone has a reason and the reason is good enough, it's okay?
No, because I don't think there's actually a very cogent reason for polygyny. Right, because in the past, during the pre-colonial era, when we had rudimentary type of agriculture, subsistence farming, right, where farming was labor intensive, so you needed more people, more hands to work on the farm. So if you have more children, or the bigger the size of the family, the more prospect that you are going to, be successful in your farming activities, right? So there was a reason for it. Now, again, in societies where ancestorship was very important, and where one of the conditions for becoming an ancestor is to have multiple children, then it was also important to have more children. But in the contemporary world, ask yourself, why would somebody want to do that? In the world today, you don't need thousands of hands to work on a piece of land. We've mechanized agriculture. So why would you want to have multiple children? Right? And then again, if you are a Christian, then what it means is that you are not so much deeply embedded in the notion of ancestorhood, because you look beyond ancestorship, you look onto Christ or eternal bliss in heaven, not in the ancestral world. So again, that rationale will also not be there. Now, if it's a matter of a man's high libido, as I've heard some people saying, now that is also not a good argument, because no matter how strong, how many women you are given, if you don't exercise discipline, you never be satisfied. So you keep moving from one woman to the other, you never get. So the point is, what is the limit in terms of numbers of women that can actually satisfy a man's libido? limitless.
Okay. Anyway, so I think we'll move on. So again, once again, we are on thinking through issues in Ghana and Africa, and I have Charles Prempeh here with me. The next question I want Prempeh to briefly address is, how should we see polygyny in the church today?
I think the church should look at contextualization, right? The church should consider individuals' backgrounds. When people come to Christ, they come with their cultures. And so if the church is to be first-handed and then attack, or if the church is to be very confrontational, then the church may not make a headway in terms of resolving issues related to polygyny.
And winning souls as well.
And winning souls. So the church, as I keep saying, should use dialogue, tact, and wisdom to engage with people who had multiple women before coming to Christ.
Okay.
And I also think that there's the need for teaching, and there's a need for a kind of social intervention, programs from the church to help persons who, for whatever reasons, are struggling in their marriage relations. So I think when we are able to do that, we'll be able to manage instances of polygyny in the church and also in the families.
Awesome. That sounds really good. I like the fact that you mentioned wisdom, because without wisdom we might compromise on certain things in the church, and will corrupt the morals of the church. I think I like that. The last question before we leave, we don't have much time, is, do you think polygyny is consistent with the 21st century world?
I think that the world today has deeply been modernized in terms of technology, right? So that what human beings would have done in the past are now done by machines, right? So in the past, let's say I needed to be deeply a social human being. So I existed because my father had the land, my mother, in that order. But in the world today, things have really changed. There's so much of individualism, which may have its negative consequences. But the point is, people no longer have to depend on their extended family members to survive. People don't have to necessarily depend on their children to survive. People necessarily don't have to depend on their parents to survive.
It's more like each one for himself.
Exactly. And it isn't just a matter of even each one for himself. It's a matter of institutions.
Okay.
We've institutionalized the world in such a way that there is what Emil Durkheim will call differentiation, right? So that if in the past I had to rely on my father's land to survive, now I don't have to. Okay, now children, even before they are born, have bank account already, right? They have insurance policies, they have education policies. So children would no longer have to depend on their grandfathers necessarily in order to survive. Today people organize their own funerals before they even die.
Right.
Because they have funeral policies. So what I'm trying to say is that the reason for polygyny is not as strong and cogent as it used to be before the contemporary world. And even in religions that promote polygyny, for example, like Islam, you notice that it was not for the sake of sexual satisfaction necessarily, right? It was an attempt to deal with existential needs, because those were the times people were fighting. And men were those who were fighting, so women were left behind. So such marriages were necessitated for men to take care of women who were widows who had been left behind as a result of the demise of their husbands. So if you put all this together, what I would say is that we live in a world where we have deeply, modernized, and technology is almost at the cutting edge. Right, so that we don't have to so much depend on human labor, which was one of the reasons for polygyny. Issues of barrenness. Science is gradually making inroads in terms of, providing answers to barrenness. You don't necessarily have to complain of barrenness anymore. Science has provided antidotes to barrenness. So if your wife's unable to have a child, it's temporarily, except it is a congenital challenge, But apart from that, I think science has made inroads. So that you won't have the reason to say I'm going for another wife because my wife's unable to have children.
All right. Thank you very much, Prempeh, for coming, and thank you for listening to us. We'll have next episode, and we are thinking about discussing issues pertaining to Ghana and Africa. And the next episode, I promise you, we'll be talking about the issue in KNUST, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I'll be very glad to host Prempeh again. But before you leave, please leave your comments and any criticisms or suggestions or anything you have on this particular topic or the entire program we are holding now. Thank you, Prempeh, for coming.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's a pleasure to be part of this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, see you.
Okay, so yes, we all thank you very much for listening to us. We believe you enjoyed the discussion. Please feel free to leave your comment, just as I said, and we'll be happy to respond to anything that requires response. Thank you very much once again. Have a good one.